I had an interesting thing happen this week, and I really wanted your take on it. So, when we talk about the universe and law of attraction and how things line up, and this whole effortless versus struggle and effort, and I've spent my life struggling and efforting. That's even a word, I don't know, but sort of how Gary and Joshua explain it to make things happen. And so in this new business role that I'm working in, I really like the gentleman. We've had some interesting dynamics and conversations, but the potential, and you do that when you see a certain business opportunity, I immediately look forward and go, wow, okay, there's potential there. Now that potential needs to be cultivated, right? So nothing is guaranteed. But right now we're very much in the infant stages of where it could go and what the opportunity is, and raising money and so forth. But this week, and the gentleman who's sort of running this thing has a tendency to talk to everybody and then just throw phone numbers at me to follow up on. And 99.9% of the people that I follow up on are just a waste of my time. And I say it affectionately to him. I'm like, listen, please don't waste my time. This is, it's painful. Well, this week we had a phone call with a couple of individuals who really were dynamic, who were intelligent and could talk the talk. Now, when I went to do some research on them online, like a simple thing, like if you were to Google my name and like Mariah Carey or LA Reid, they were people who invested in my companies. You could see a picture of me with them, right? It's just things like that. I can't find anything online about these two guys, not one thing. And their websites are just plain, but they do things in the public domain as if they described to me, but I couldn't find anything. But I still don't have like a bad feeling. Like I've had bad feelings before, and I'm sure you have too. I'm like, okay, like this is just not good. I'm like, no, these guys seem to, and then the guy shows up, he's wearing the right suit, he's looking the right part, talking the right part, and I'm sort of, my first thing to do was to do some research. Okay, ask the guy, hey, can you show me some case studies and some examples? Can I get a recommendation, right? And the guy was like, don't you know who I am? I'm like, dude, I don't know who you are. Like, I don't know who, I don't think I'm supposed to know. So part of me from New York is like, okay, this is either the greatest, scam speech on the planet, or maybe these guys really are. But, and I asked myself, I'm like, how do you feel? Like, I like the guys. Like, they're nice guys. I like talking to them. Are we writing a check tomorrow? No, this is not about writing a check tomorrow. But my initial thought was, okay, let's just do some research and prove it out. Well, I did some research, and the comment where, hey, I spend a lot of time and money making sure that you can't Google me, right? And I work in very high profile things, and I don't want my name being noticed because people could see that I'm, I may work with people who are competitors. I don't want them knowing, right? And I'm like, okay, I understand these things. But I part of me is, do I live in fear and walk away and be like, I can't find anything, this is not the right deal? Or like these guys, like, they're exciting individuals that talked about doing something that I've been trying to do, for 30 years. And I'm like, and these guys have the resources and the funds, well, according to them. And I was like, well, what do I do? And I would tell you, the old me would have blew these guys up in a heartbeat. I'm like, and when I said I'm a loser, you can Google my name and find me with, celebrities, and I'm a loser. I'm a nobody. If you guys are so big, you got to be able to find you guys someplace, right? That would have been the old me. But the new me is like, hey, cool, whatever. Like, I get it, and there's lawyers and legal stuff involved, right? So we're gonna do the basics, right, of any kind of deal. Do a little background check, right? But everybody was like, are you really okay with this? And I'm like, I didn't say I was okay with it. I said, we're going to follow through and have these conversations. I'm not writing a check, but we're definitely going to follow through and see what happens. And I didn't know what your perspective on that was. I was like, I'm just going to follow Joshua and be like, I feel good about these guys. Okay, they're nice people.
Well, that's a very interesting one. And, I have this thing going on in my head, which is my business self, which is, your previous New York self, as you described it. On the one hand, it's like, that doesn't stack up. It doesn't really make any sense, that Google thing. Like, I just find that implausible, because it's pretty much impossible if you are doing pretty much anything out there. It's pretty much impossible that you not referred to somewhere in an article or somebody else's website, or somewhere on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. But you can be invisible online, but it's a pretty hard thing to do. And then
all those things you could find on LinkedIn, but it was blank. It was just, there was nothing there. It attacked to his website with, there was nothing there. So when you put his name in, it does connect to these things, but there's no information.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So from a business point of view, to me, that all of that is quite suspicious. But if you want to look at it from a higher perspective, then the high perspective is not necessarily that these guys might be right for this deal. It might be that there is some other purpose or discovery that you may make. So in other words, if it is okay, it may not be okay for the reasons that you're seeking. It may be okay or interesting or useful for some other reason that's completely different. So just because you feel okay about it in that sense, and you're looking for the higher understanding of it, doesn't mean to say that it is going to work out in terms of the business deal that is on the table.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of
so
that.
In other words, out of all the 10 possible outcomes of where this might lead, or whether it's to discover a limiting belief or whether it's a different opportunity, out of a 10 possible, or whatever number it is, things, like if you just focus on the one thing, which is the deal in front of you, that may or may not be what's at play here.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like from a business point of view, I would approach it with a great degree of caution, because like that my sniffer radar thing, is like, this does not stack up.
Right. But and I agree with you, and I'm sort of questioning this thing there. Like, if the universe is giving you opportunities constantly, and I'm processing my limiting beliefs, I don't really have a belief that I'm going to get scammed. It's not something I fear. I'm going to be taken advantage of. It's not something I really fear in any way whatsoever. So that's why I'm like, it's just such an incredible, unique situation, right? It's so actually kind of cool, like to have this big opportunity presented to you. And then the normal thing I would do is look for this background support. And the big thing is there, and there's little to none of the background support. And I'm like, wow, this is so awesome. And it's funny. So and tell me what you think about this. So then I had asked one of the other guys who had bought him in. I said, hey, do you have any, past history on these guys or any work? And he goes, no, but I'll reach out to them. I said, okay. And I've had now like multiple phone calls with these guys. And after this guy reaches out, I get a phone call last night at like 8:00. And I usually don't take phone calls. I don't take phone calls after 6. Like I'll just delete. Talk to me tomorrow. If someone really needs me, they can text me, hey, it's an emergency, right? But I don't take phone calls. But I saw the guy's name pop up, and I'm like, all right, I'll take it. And he was like, hey, I heard you were looking for, and it was a weird conversation. I'm like, you heard I was looking for what? Like, I asked you on the phone, like, could you send me over a case study or an example, or, and they were calling to have a conversation versus like, hey, yeah, no problem, we'll send over some stuff. And I found that kind of weird as well. But I guess, like, I don't know if it was weird and a good thing. I'm trying to keep an open mind without being judgmental. Right.
Yeah, well, it may not go where you think it's going to go, but it's an interesting one, because everything you say to me from a business point of view just does not stack up, right? And also from an online point of view, and also the fact that he would come back to you and say, hey, I hear you're trying to whatever, like, approaching that part of it rather than trying to give the information, like either they've got, references, referrals, whatever you want to call it, or they don't. Either they got case studies or they don't. But if, from a business point of view, if they're mucking around with that stuff, then, I can't, it's obviously going to go somewhere interesting for you, but I suspect it won't be where you thought it might have gone when you started.
Yeah. And I've been down through the gutter a few times in business, right? As we've talked about. So I'm not really fearful of like if it crashed and burned, I'm like, okay, like it's not, that doesn't scare me.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Yeah. So what you might call healthy skepticism or something, but it is a really interesting example of how do you take a new higher approach to something like this, while also keeping your business smarts and your BS detector and your radar going as well.
Right. And it's funny because it's outside the normal industry. So we're in industry X, and these guys have reached out. They're in industry Y, a much bigger industry, and they're like, hey, we want to be able to combine these. It would really be an industry disruptor for both our industry and their industry. And it really hasn't been done before. So I'm not familiar with anybody, in that sort of, we're going from like this like celebrity sports agent, entertainment agent publicity from the medical field, right, and the consumer product field. So I've reached out to a few people and been like, hey, have you ever heard of these guys? And it's always like kind of like Superman. Yeah, I think I might have seen that. It's like,
right, okay, which is all very vague. Yeah. So
it's
in this deal,
so weird.
In this deal, which way does the money flow? From you to them or them to you?
It's going to flow to start from us to them.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's what I said. I'm like, okay.
Okay.
And
right.
It's seven figures. It's not like it's
Yeah.
6 figures. It's 7 figures.
Yeah.
And the a few things too. Like there was like both these two guys said at different times, like, hey, I don't take every meeting that I'm invited to join. I don't take a lot of meetings. Like the same terms they've both said to me at different times, like it's separately, and I'm like, okay, like who says that, by the way? Like, I don't normally take meetings. Like I'm like, I would just say like, oh, my schedule's really tight, let me get back to you, right? It's not like if I took every meeting that was offered to me, I would never have any. I'm like, there was some weird. So I was like, all right, like I said, very nice guys, and they know how to name drop. So it's just I'm gonna play it out. And
I mean, if you can play it out without risk, then that would be very interesting. Why do you think the guy you're working with keeps giving you dead end phone leads to follow up?
I think he is honestly, he's so desperate to believe in himself. I mean, he's a wonderful human being. So when someone says, I can do this for you, right? It's, to be honest, 99% of the time that's bullshit. I mean, I'm going to call a spade, right? People that say I can do that, I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. Because people, before they understand the business situation, they don't ask any questions, and you give them and I'm like, okay, you really have no clue what you're doing. There are so many facets to running a business, right, and growing a business. To have a 5-minute conversation and someone say, I can do this, you're like, okay, goodbye. And these guys tell them constantly, I can do this, I can do that. And I'm looking at them like so it was a guy actually in New Zealand. So this is a great story. And you'll probably come up with the same answer I came up with. I took a company that was doing metal animal stamps. They were doing $3 million a year. And I took them to $53 million in 1 year.
Wow.
And I just said to the guy, I'm going to hang up now, because you're either the worst liar or the worst business person I've ever spoken to. Because there's not a shot you're taking anybody from 3 million to 53 million unless you're doing 24 to 36 months of investment, building inventory, building infrastructure, getting fulfillment house in. You're so full of, I didn't want to, I can't even, I said, I can't continue this conversation. Like there's no way you know anything. And the guy was like, how dare you, man? How dare I am? You're lying to me on the phone. Let's get 5 people, get the guy on the phone. I want him to tell me right now what you did, and I'll write you a 6-figure check. Well, let me be honest with you. I said, exactly. So I get really like, when people say, I can do this, I'm like, no way. It's just not right. And you know this from a business, the amount of work and it's not, it's hard work. The amount of things that have to come together.
Yeah.
Right. And everything to flow. And it could be beautiful, easy flow. Right. But it takes time, and it takes conversations, and you got to meet people and continue to meet new people. So you expand and grow, and it's all beautiful and wonderful. But to say I can do it in 12 months is it's kind of a little
even
silly.
in a virtual business, that is hard, because as it grows that fast, you need so many other things around you to make it work and to be viable. And that's part of the constraint, even in a lot of the online stuff I do, that you can see some of the people I deal with could scale a lot, but in order to do that, everything has to upscale as well, including their marketing systems, their databases, like everything. Yeah. So coming back to the guy that gives you all these dead end leads to follow up. So from one point of view, you can say he's doing that because, and it kind of sounds more in the camp of abdication rather than delegation, if you know what I mean. But from the law of attraction point of view, you might say, well, why am I attracting all these dead end leads from this guy? Like, so in other words, if you are the creator of your reality, then in what way might you be attracting that phenomenon?
That's a really good way to reframe it. Yeah. And from my standpoint, I love meeting new people. And I just keep saying, the way I answer that question myself is I just keep building my network. I'm just building my network. I'm meeting new people. The funny part is, so one of my biggest limiting beliefs was I'm not capable, right? I'm not smart enough. I think I've shared some of those manifestation event forms with you that I've done, right? So the funny thing is all these people that it's funny you say abdicated. I really like that. That was clever. That he's sort of giving me, right, or deciding not to. We're having very nice conversations. Like even the guy who I came at like that, we now talk once every 2 weeks, and I probably will end up doing business with the guy. It's funny, right? But I said to him, I need to understand what it is, and he's like, no, you get it. And so all these people that I start having these conversations with, I end up having long-term conversations over time, and we keep connecting and reconnecting. And then I find later that someone like, oh yeah, I spoke to so-and-so, and they said that you were really good at what you were doing. That I should reach out and we would have fun working together. So all of these guys that ended up being dead ends are not right for the business.
Right.
I've ended up being like, okay, this is just not right. But I see the value. I'm like, oh my God, like this guy from New Zealand is brilliant. Like he was just trying to oversell me. He is brilliant. He's got a great concept. I told you the name of the company was Glass Elephants, right? It's part of that, the toy, what was the old toy company that moved in, that's in from New Zealand? The name is Zulu or?
Yeah.
Right. And the guy actually is like, and I'm like, wow, he was trying to oversell, right? Here I am, we are Beverly Hills company, right? He's new. He was like, oh, we did all this. And I'm like, you don't have to oversell me. Like smart is smart.
Yep.
So, and the guy is really smart, like really like the guy a lot. So although I'm having these interesting, for me, the way I'm framing it is like, I'm meeting great people and the feedback I'm getting is so positive. Like it's reinforcing, it's almost tearing down those limiting beliefs and rebuilding these new ones. Like, hey, you were hanging out with the wrong people. You were hanging out with all these people that were pushing, and you were literally drowning with them. And now I'm going to introduce you to all these new people that may not be right for the business, but long term, this is going to be your new network. And that's sort of how I've been thinking about it.
Yeah. I guess if you can see there's value there, then that puts a different perspective on it, that you're attracting something bigger. Yeah. Well, interesting times really in your life. You have a lot of interesting threads in your life currently.
I do, and I'm super interested about this new thread because these guys are talking big numbers. Like it's funny, like it's like giggle numbers. Like we're gonna 5 years, it's $100 million. This is how we do it. And I'm like, what? Like, how do you, like, but they have a very specific, and I'm like, okay, that could work. I'm like, that actually makes, that actually makes sense. Like, okay. And you need obviously a big upfront investment. And you got to hit, you got to hit some things, you got to hit some screws, right. But it's still, as a business guy, it's fun to talk about doing something that's worth that versus doing something that's a $2 or $3 million deal, right? But like I said, those kind of deals come around once in a billion. And is it because? So I'm questioning it, obviously, on every possible.
With your corporation records or your LLC records, like, are those records all publicly available?
So it's funny. So the way, and obviously the way I started this, and I had asked them for some information, but I asked them to sign an NDA. So I said, listen, let's just get the corporation. I need to, there was I was asking for stuff, but it wasn't flowing for, but I'm about to share some marketing stuff. So I said, let's just get an NDA in place. Normal thing, right? And I'm going to wait to get their LLC information so I can have our lawyers just look them up.
Yeah.
How long
I mean, I know there's this stuff like Dun and Bradstreet and all that stuff. You can do research and court records and all the rest of it. I don't want to sound suspicious, but I would also cover up all the normal bases. I wouldn't totally abdicate all my normal commercial caution or prudence. I know you aren't. I know you aren't. But if you're approaching it from a point of view of interested observation and curiosity, which is good. Yeah.
But if you follow what Joshua was saying, right? If I'm not saying we do, but if you really take, he goes, and it does feel good. I don't even have a twinge of don't do this. I mean, in my head's telling me you got to be smarter. You got to be that guy that finds the problems. You could write. So in my head, but in my heart, I'm like, wow, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, and by the way, thankfully I have a COO and a CFO who can, and I've told them, thankfully they'll do some of the right, the due diligence. It's not all just, a decision I'm going to make blindly, right? There's a group involved.
Yeah.
But I am going to, and I said to them, I'm going to push forward as if this is a done deal till someone shows me that it shouldn't be.
Yeah. I don't know why, but what keeps popping into my head is the story you told me once, maybe twice, about in New York years ago, about the bookmaker guy.
Which guy? Which one was that?
So what's the word we call him a bookmaker. So the guy who the gambling guy.
Gambling, yes. Yeah.
Like, who worked for the
Gambino
alternative organization.
Yeah, he was actually like I think he was taking gambling bets for the it was part of the Gambino. Yeah.
So like initially I mean, obviously he was a likable guy, and your initial thing was, hey, we're all friends. He and his colleagues, it's like we're all friends. And then it turned out that although you had a good feeling about it, the learning for you was actually something completely different. It wasn't actually about making friends. It was about, I'm not actually going to ever go down that path again. Like, you're a young man, you gambled some money, and then you stopped that before it ever got out of control. And then that was, a very good thing to cut off in your life. But my point is that initial friendship with those guys turned into actually a valuable lifelong decision about, okay, there is no future in gambling. And a lot of young guys do that. Like at a certain age, it's a very appealing thing. And then you think, oh, actually, no, it's not.
100%, especially when you're young. Like I was in New York City. I was living in an apartment with two other guys, right? I mean, I didn't have a family. I had no bills. And you come into a little bit of money, right? What are you supposed to do with it? Like, you can invest and do those things, but I wasn't responsible.
Yeah. No, it's very appealing. And especially if you get an early win, then,
that's a good reminder.
It's quite addictive. And
yes.
But, so my point really, I guess, as to why he keeps popping into my head is because what you considered initially to be a friendship turned out to be an opportunity for you not to go down a particular path in your life.
Well said. That's a great reminder.
Yeah,
that's a great reminder.
And I only mention him because when you've been talking about these guys, he keeps popping into my head like 5 or 6 times as you were talking. I just keep getting this picture of this.
Wow. Okay, that's good advice. I was going to actually ask Joshua that, and I may ask him next week. Hey, is this, help me understand, how do you know, or right? Like, what's that? And maybe
it's a good question to ask because I mean, to me, one of the, like, if we are publishing these videos or podcasts, whatever we do with it, to me, one of the things that you and I can bring is, like, to me, an underlying theme of what we're trying to cover here is two, kind of ordinary guys with a business background who are trying to, or working to apply the law of attraction in daily life, right? So it's like we've gone through this whole other system of belief and action, and now we're trying to actually match that up, with ordinary lives. How do ordinary people, with some business interests, how do we take a law of attraction approach to life. I mean, that's really the fundamental theme of, I think, what we discuss here. And so this is a really good example of a challenge one might face, and where the stakes are potentially quite high, and that is getting the decision right, is pretty important, because the consequences of taking various paths are significant.
Right. Well, theoretically, if we follow, any choice I make is right, and the outcome is neutral, right? Theoretically. So with that sort of approach, looking at the deal, I'm just like, okay, there's enough people doing some background, having some conversations. For me, for the first time ever, I'm not trying to either make it happen or not make it happen. I'll take the phone call, I'll have the conversation, and I'm like, okay, guys, this is what you need to figure out. And if all this stuff lines up, let's do it. And if it doesn't line up, then let's have another conversation. It's not right. So it's a very different approach than I've had in the past, where it's, where I've gone into something very particular where these 4 things need to line up. And that's how at the last group I was with, that's how the whole management team. And I would look at them like, so the guy didn't do this. So what? And you're like, nope, done. Move on to the next one. And I'm like, he's like, it's just not here. He always used to say, it's just not worth it. If they can't line up these 4 basic things, it's not worth my time. And I'm always like, well, most people don't run businesses well.
Yeah. So another thing is, you talked about the opportunity to intersect industry X and industry Y. And if that's a viable concept, then it may be that there are other people in the other industry, the other sector, with whom you could actually have the same exploration. And there's probably no reason why you can't be doing that at the same time anyway. If that truly is the opportunity to match these 2 industries in a way that nobody's thought of, if that's a disruptor, then they're not the only potential partner in that space, are they? And then no. I guess that's a way to road test that concept as well. If other players in that other industry have reasons why it couldn't happen, or it could happen, and nobody, it is possible that they've come up with something that nobody's ever thought of before. But the way Wayne Dyer used to call it, an idea whose time has come, which is one way of phrasing it. And Joshua basically says that we attract an idea from what I call the field of potentiality. So all the potential ideas are there in theory, but it's only when somebody has a need for an idea or a business concept or whatever, this XY thing, it's only when somebody has a need that's attracted into the physical. And then once somebody attracts it into the physical, that somehow becomes available to everyone. And there are famous things in history, such as flight, whenever that was 100 and something years ago, that there were people in the United States and people in New Zealand as well, actually, all seemed to have the same idea at the same time of creating the first aircraft, right? And there are many examples of that. And if you read about that stuff, there are countless examples, and whether it's with humans or chimpanzees, the same thing seems to happen. So so if you've attracted this concept and it is a groundbreaker, or if it is a disruptor, then the law of attraction thing, whatever that particular part of it is called, would suggest that once that idea has been brought in from the field of potentiality, then other people have access to that idea as well.
You say that, and that sort of really hits home in a very, it resonates. So I'm, in one way, I'm like, wow, am I actually resonating that this, because I believe this opportunity is something I've always strived for. And I actually have this conversation with people, like, this is the opportunity that's going to allow us to achieve X, right? And I'm like, am I finally on that vibration where this just comes effortlessly and it isn't any work? Right. And then the business side of me is like, okay, do some research, figure out these, But I'm like, so it's, if I'm going to dive in and do business the way Joshua is explaining it, then it's until something feels wrong. Right?
But it could just be that the purpose of these guys was to hatch the idea, right? To bring it from the field of potentiality into physical reality. And that it's like, okay, I can see there's an opportunity here, and then who else could we do this deal with? Like, it may or may not hinge on those people only. I mean, maybe that was their purpose, was to bring the idea.
I like that. That's, that's funny. And somebody actually did say to me too, there are other people who can do similar things to this.
Yes.
And this is what we chose to do.
Yeah. That's the business take on what I was really describing as the law of attraction take. And I think that's a smart business concept as well. It's like, okay, let's see who else is out there, and because we're not married to these guys yet, so let's see who else we could do this deal with.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, this is the other thing too. It's like, well, we got to make this deal happen fast if we're going to do this. And I'm like, as soon as they say stuff like that, I start laughing. I'm like, okay, right. There's certain things. I don't take every meeting. We got to make this deal happen fast. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
those to me are classics.
I have to say my BS sniffer has been at red alert level throughout this conversation.
Yeah, and it's funny because I haven't really told anybody about it for that specific reason. I'm like, okay, is this too good to be true? But once again, Joshua says, yes, these things are good. This is supposed to happen for you. And I'm like, all right, I'll just take it.
I mean, outrageously wonderful things do happen.
They do, right?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty interesting.
I will keep you updated. It is, but it's been very encompassing. The other thing too, I don't know if you read the last exercise, and I wanted to talk to you about this. So before I had met Joshua, I was doing, the Esther, Abraham Hicks. I was doing all those different people, right? And every morning I was getting up and I was, doing my manifesting, doing my goals, what I wanted, right? And literally listing all these things, right? And that I wanted. And there's no question that a year ago, so the one question they asked was, in the last 90 days, what have you manifested for yourself? And I stood there and I was like, oh my God, I don't think I've done anything. Because I've been so focused on these manifestation events and so focused on spending all this time trying to get into alignment, right? Trying to feel good about it and trying to process my limiting beliefs, that now a year ago, I could give you 25 things that I manifested. New car, new home. I mean, all these things. I mean, there's no question. There's boatloads of things. Working from home, new job, new salary, new this. I mean, it's like, and then all of a sudden, like I looked at the last night, I'm like, I don't think I've even tried to manifest anything.
So this was the plot from like 4 or 5 days ago, right?
Is that what you're exactly about? Yeah,
exactly. Right. Yeah. That's an interesting thing, is because I'm sure you have, but they're probably of a different order of reality than the car or the house. Like it's probably something quite different, and it's it could be the ascension experience.
It's funny. I was looking for something I could do on a regular basis that would continue. So there's no question that as you sit back, but the big thing is the evolution, right? Of what, to your point, of what I either am manifesting or I'm forgetting I'm manifesting. But every single day you're creating your life. Every single element, every single moment of every day you are creating. You're doing this, right? You're creating your own reality. And what I realized, though, at a certain point, from whenever I started with Joshua, which I started in December, right, with Gary, with a one-on-one with Gary, but I'm no longer asking for what I was asking for a year ago, and that was the big, I think, revelation through that exercise when they asked me, like, what do you? So my question to you was, if you look at over the last year, 2 years ago or a year ago, what were you looking to manifest versus over the last 90 days, what were you looking to manifest? Is it similar?
No, they're probably pretty different. There are some consistent themes, but yeah. I mean, the example I actually used was around finding this house to live in for a year. And I listed all the unlikely factors that really came together, such as that beekeeping thing, which, was like, how unlikely is that?
Yeah, that's a pretty big thing.
Yeah. So, and there was a whole lot of stuff around, things like that. I won't go into the detail, but yeah. so I guess now the things I want to manifest are not as specific and not as material, and it's really more about the continued exploration and learning in the journey, or whatever you want to call it, that I now realize that the whole point is to feel good and to have fun and enjoy yourself, be joyous, and to be in alignment, really. So, you know, my aims are, instead of X million dollars, is really the end result of all of that, which is to lead a joyous, happy, aligned life, so that every day is fun and blissful. Because, you know, I am aware that, and I think this happens to a lot of people, that when I was much younger, like the simple joys of every day, like I went out this morning at dawn and the birds, you know, the dawn chorus was happening and the birds were tweeting, and there was some, you know, the air was amazing with the weather pattern we're having and the smell of it, because it's, you know, a little bit of spring almost coming. And it was just like a magical moment. And when I was younger, I just automatically reveled in those moments. But then by the time I got to my 50s, I suppose, I didn't have that same innate joie de vivre, or joy of life, or being in the moment. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that, but doing this work has helped me get back to that, because I guess it seemed frivolous and I had more important concerns, you know, like, well, that's all very well, but I got to get on and do this. And so, but with Joshua's teachings, it's like, well, part of the point of it is to feel good and to be in the moment and enjoy yourself. Not that that's novel, you know, that's a ancient spiritual truth, you know, to be in the moment. But it's like the end purpose is no more than feeling good. Like if you're feeling good and feeling, that's because it's an indicator of being in alignment. If you're feeling good and you're in alignment and you're appreciating the beauty of the moment you've created, you know, the birds and the breeze with a hint of spring in it and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that in itself is the end goal, really. And, you know, if you had a house that was worth 5 million more or whatever, or for another 5 million in the bank, you're not going to enjoy that moment any more than you did. And the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. And Josh is always saying, do you have enough of everything you need right in this very moment? And it's like, yeah, well, I do in this moment. And then people say, but I also need X, Y, Z. You know, I might need a retirement fund or 401k, whatever you call it, or, you know, a different house or a house or whatever. It's like, yes, but in this exact moment, do you have everything you need? Yeah, I do. And then the rest of it is just a thought, right? It's purely a thought. The rest of it is a thought that you've turned into a worry or fear about the future. And so, so I guess in terms of things I wanted in the past might have been to allay those perceived future fears, whereas now it's more about how do I maximize enjoying every moment? Because I mean, there is nothing other than the moment, right? The past is just a fiction, really, because Joshua says quite rightly that most of us are not accurate in the way we remember the past. We don't remember it accurately at all. We just remember a few things. And if you compare your notes of the past to other people, they're completely different. Like, it's very uncommon that everyone agrees on the way past events happened. And the future doesn't exist, and it's a thought, and you're busy creating it anyway. So there is nothing than the present moment. And, you know, that's an ancient spiritual wisdom anyway. But I think the key to me, the whole thing about abundance is, do I have everything I need in this exact moment? Yes, I do. I have enough of everything, like whether it's health, time, money, whatever it is, love, you know, all the things we want. We do have enough in this moment.
Joshua said a thing today, you'll like it. So when you get a chance to look at that, if I don't know what number it's going to be, 315, 316. So, because it's like a perfect segue. So somebody asked today, well, you know, I want abundance, and, you know, like, well, do you have enough? He's like, yeah, but I want millions more. Why can't I have millions more? Right. And he goes, well, you're going to take a trip. Like, that's an hour plane ride. Right. Do you need to fly first class? No. Do you need to take your whole wardrobe with you? Like, do you need, you need more of what? Like, you're going for a weekend. And for like what we ask for, and he's saying, do you have everything you need right now? And you're like, yeah. I mean, I paid my daughter's college tuition bill. I paid my credit card bill. I paid my mortgage. And my wife and I, last week we went to New York. We had a great trip. We ate at great restaurants. We had so much fun. Tonight we're going to see Sebastian Maniscalco, who's this great stand-up comedian. Right. I'm like, yeah, I mean, what more, right? I'm like, okay. I mean, awesome. Like, do I need more? Right. My first thought is, okay, I got another daughter. She's going to go to college in 3 years. I got another thing, right? I'm like, once again, I'm going away for the weekend. Do I need my whole wardrobe? And I thought that was a really good analogy. And then somebody was on the phone and she just did a beautiful, beautiful job. And I forget who it was. And she said, I'm so struggling with money right now. We're at a hotel. I don't even know how we're going to pay the bill, but we're still here. And she started to, really get emotional and I think it really hit me emotionally as well too, right? She's like, I'm trying to embody this thing and we're just going to do it. We're going to do it. And Joshua said, well, listen, you need to go through this because who you're going to be tomorrow or 2 days from now, this feeling and this event is critical to who you are. And it's when he said that, my mind just sort of exploded. I had a conversation last week and somebody was asking, hey, do you have a master's in business? I said, I don't have a master's in business. I have just a regular bachelor's of science. And I said, well, what I do have, I may not have an MBA from Harvard, but I have an MBA from federal bankruptcy court, where I had to go to weekly for 6 months and get my butt handed to me to figure out how to get the business in line and get it sought, sold, and bought. So whatever school you think you went to, I can guarantee you, I have a lot more experience. And it was funny. The guy started laughing. He's like, oh my God, that's the best line I ever heard in my life. Right. So I look about why I had gone through that and I'm like, oh, I'm ashamed. I can't believe I went through that. But hey, he's like, well, wait a minute. You took the company in and out. I'm like, yeah. You kept all your employees. Yeah. He's like, holy cow, how'd you do that? I'm like, getting on my knees. I gained 50 pounds. I begged a federal judge every single Friday to make sure payroll went through. This is why we needed this. It was essential business needs, right? But the funny part is when I went through it, I felt like that woman. I was like, why is this happening to me? This is terrible. Yeah. Right. So today's episode was really great when we talk about the abundance and what we need. And I think, you've been in a position where you've had so much more than you needed. Right. And you've enjoyed that. Right. And then you've like, wow, it's fun. It's fun. Right. But then on the other hand, it can become debilitating because you had said to me, like, hey, where am I going to spend my time? Like, wait a minute, I didn't have freedom anymore. Well, I have this home here. I have this here. I have to go spend it here. I can't just go here. Right. And all of a sudden, all of those elements, all of that additional abundance takes away from some of the freedom, which is an interesting concept. You're like, okay, whoa, all right. Because we all want more. Of what? I have no idea, but we want more of it.
Yeah. I mean, freedom is one of the key facets of abundance. Time and health and love and money are part of it, but freedom as well. And that's something I've noticed a lot in the last short while with the work we're doing and the Ascension experience is that my sense of personal freedom has expanded. And I also realized just how much freedom we've created in our life in the last few years compared to most people, roughly our age, that they don't actually have anything like the freedom that we've created. Like, on the one hand, we don't have some of the things we had before, but on the other hand, we have enormous freedom to actually do pretty much what we want to do. Like, we have very few constraints compared to most people. And I realized the value of it. Was watching some silly thing on Netflix last night that my sister recommended, which was kind of, I don't watch reality TV, but except for this thing, and it's about this family in Paris, mum, dad, and 4 sons, and the grandmother, and they get into the real estate business, and they get into high-end apartment sales in Paris and some other European cities. And on the one hand, they have this fabulous lifestyle, and they're very nice people, and they all get on well. But on the other hand, when one of the sons decides that he wants to go and do something different because his wife got this amazing contract for her architecture business in Portugal, then suddenly it's like, on the one hand, this is an amazing life you have, but on the other hand, you have zero personal freedom and your family are just trying to control you. And I thought, wow, this was, I don't know how I guess they played it up for the TV, but it was very stark to me that what on the one hand is a wonderful scenario with this family environment, on the other hand is also incredibly, he was entrapped really in his own life.
I love that. If you get a chance, we should Google it. Jerry Hicks, Esther Hicks' husband.
Yep.
Before they started this whole, I guess, road trip, right? That him and Esther did.
Yeah.
He was a multi-level
marketer guy, wasn't he?
Right. He was in a couple different things, right? I think he was actually with Amway at one point. Right.
Yep.
But he has a manifestation request. And I thought I had it here. I was just looking for it because I liked it so much. I have a point of it. He said, I want a job where I'm never tied down, where I can go wherever I want. I don't want to have any employees. I'm like, me neither. Like, I've been that route. I want no employees, right? When people tell me they want employees, I'm like, yeah, you never run a business. Right?
Yeah.
And he goes, so I want the personal freedom to go wherever I want. I don't want to have any employees. I want to make a lot of money. I want the money and the success to represent something I personally believe in and is important to me. And like, I paraphrased it, but it was one of the most beautiful. I'm like, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've been through that. Like when I was in the investment business, we had like 45 staff, which is a lot in a small country like New Zealand. And
it's like 10% of your population.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, most people in New Zealand work for us. Yeah. So, and then we did have employees in our current business as well, but now we actually don't have any employees. We have contractors all around the place, around the world, and that works really well. And some of them become good friends, even though we'd never met them apart from virtually. But we also discovered about 6 or 7 years ago that we can live anywhere we want as long as there's internet and work from there. And then it's moving now to the next part of what Jerry Hicks said, right? So we've got the work from anywhere, we've got the no employees, and we have enormous freedom with it. But the next part is to do more of the parts that are meaningful and less of the parts that aren't meaningful. And then if I can incorporate some more of the sort of stuff we're talking about here into what I do. And we're creating a website which is kind of like a LOA info kind of information portal for people to offer courses and services related to law of attraction. So
when you get it ready, let me know, because honestly, the first thing I'm going to do is give it to my daughter to go to college campuses. I will tell you this, the really interesting thing is that my daughter was 18. Well, she'll be 18 next month, but she's going to college. These college kids, like I can tell you that all they do is read about manifesting, about alignment. Like I am buying a book every 2 or 3 weeks for my daughter. Dad, which book should I get? Which book? Like Wow. They love it. And she's giving it to friends, and the friends are giving it back and forth. And I'm like, I'm blown away by this. Like my friends and I we didn't read, let alone read that.
Yeah. That well, that's very interesting, because 18-year-olds were not like that, not that long ago. And also I had a similar experience with one of my step grandsons, so I'm very close to. I hadn't seen him in a long time for various reasons. He's mid-20s. And when we picked him up at the airport the other day, he made some kind of offhand, sort of slightly put down comment about spirituality. It was along the lines of, for people who need that, that's fine. And so I thought, okay, you're close-minded to that, because his mother's somewhat woo-woo. But anyway, he's a big boy now and he doesn't live with mum. So then I started talking about LOA, and he just absorbed it like he knew it all. It was just extraordinary. And I gave him some quite advanced concepts, and he's like, oh, yeah, okay. And I was just amazed. It's like, how did that happen? Where did that come from? I'm telling you,
it's like, my daughter so we give my kids an allowance. I think at one point I told you the struggle my wife and I were having, but we finally got their bank account set up. A whole other thing is like having a kid's bank account in the United States is insane. Like if you don't have a certain number, if you don't have like $5,000 in their bank account, they take $25 a month and in fees. I'm like, my daughter's got $25 in her bank. You're gonna wipe her out, like, right? So you have to link it to right all these. It's crazy. Anyway, so we got them into the point where we're giving them a weekly allowance now, and we've gotten the credit cards out of their hand, pried it out of their hand, right? That they have their own debit cards. But she went and spent last week, she took her allowance and she bought a monthly membership to Gabby Bernstein, who's written a couple of great books and she does great stuff, to her meditations. And they're like, I don't know, 20 meditations. And I've shared Joshua's meditations with her, which I love Joshua's meditations. I think they're amazing. But she's like, no. And then she's given her like her sign-in code to her 3 friends. They're all listening to him every morning. Like she's getting up and I have my night meditation. I have my evening and I have my morning. And I'm like, man, like when I was 18, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
But these are her and her friends. They're all doing this. And she plays sports and she's into all these different things. And I'm just like, this is the market for when you're looking for it. And it's 45,000 kids on University of Arizona campus. Right. It's like, you're like, oh my God, oh my goodness. And like my daughter, like she tells me, Dad, everybody's into this. We want to learn more. And I'm like,
well, that's pretty interesting because Joshua does talk about the time of awakening, this being the time of awakening. And, you think, well, what does that mean? Because if you look at the composition of the Ascension experience, it's mostly people, not only, but it's mostly older people, not younger people. It's at least 40 plus, and there's plenty of people in their 50s and 60s in this particular group. But and we've all arrived, from various ways, but everyone's arrived with a lot of life experience. And I guess, Gary probably naturally attracts people who aren't too different from him. That's the nature of things. And if Gary was an 18-year-old man or woman, he would be attracting 18-year-old men or women, you know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to me that when Joshua says this is the time of awakening and we're on the leading edge of the leading edge of the leading edge of thought, it's like, oh yeah, okay, maybe. But then you say this is happening with these kids. I mean, that is extraordinary and so different from what not long ago 18-year-olds were doing.
So here's the other really interesting thing. So when I was visiting my mom last week, and she's got and I can't pronounce it right, but a glioblastoma grade 4 brain tumor, which there is no cure for it, right? So she just has a period of time before she's going to pass. And before she went into the surgery, which she went into this week, we went to go visit her, and it's a lot of pressure is being put on the brain. It's not the same. You're not talking to the same person, right? So you're there loving, and we're in Sloan Kettering in New York City, which is an oncology specialist facility. Everybody in there's cancer, right? A lot of older people with cancer. And I noticed, and I actually asked this question to Joshua, that my mom, we were asking, and all she did was talk about, when I was a kid, I remember sneaking in the Bronx into Yankee Stadium for a nickel to sit in the bleachers and watch the Yankees play. I remember when I learned how to swim, I ran to the pool and I fell in. I didn't know how to swim and I just went to the bottom and the lifeguard had to pull me out. But we spent, like, in the hospitals have rules now, right? So it's only one person per day. So she's got 4 or 5 hours worth of visiting time. That was it. It was me, like, all day, right? Because, if I'm going to go up and do it, then, I'm not going to leave her alone, right? Anyway, I said to the doctor, I'm one of the nurses, I'm like, she's just babbling about when she was a kid. She's like, yeah, they all do it. And I'm like, they all do it.
I heard you talk about that. That was fascinating. And they all do it. Yeah. Yeah.
And Joshua said, and his comeback kind of blew my mind, where he's like, yeah, after the age of 12, they had to start working, right? You're talking about, that's World War II. My mom was born in 1930, I don't know, 8 or 9, right? So she was like, you're talking about, World War II, right into the Korean War, right? Just like, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. They were working, they were struggling, and she was looking for happy memories or to feel better, right? To heal herself. She had to go back to her childhood, right? That far back.
Right. Well,
it was almost like between 12, for the 70 years, between 12 and 82, there was no joy.
So very interesting thing you say, because the day before yesterday's plot is actually about that, isn't it? Like, yeah, it breaks your life into 7-year phases. And
yep.
And what is the question? I've probably got it here actually.
But yeah, tell me what's perfect, what was perfect, and what was imperfect.
What percentage of that life was perfect on a percentage scale, and what was perfect about it and what was imperfect, from 0 to 7, from 8 to 15, and so on and so on. So that is interesting, because Josh has been talking a lot about that lately, how the connection you have innately as a child, the connection with source and the joy of life, and then noticed at what point that started to vanish in your life. And in your mother's case, it seems to be around 12. Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
And he said, when you get, and he also said something which blew my mind. He goes, as you get older, and as the next generation, or what was the next generation comes in, that when, like, if you would ask me to go back to happy times, I would go back to college. Like I tell stories. I am on a group chat with guys I played, lacrosse with in college. We talk all the time, at least once a day. If someone's going to ask me my favorite, where I've had the most fun in my entire life, it was 17 to 21. There's no question. So, and high school was great too. I had no bad times, right? And he said, as each generation goes, they're going to look back even further. So your mom's generation, she stopped at 12. You'll stop at 20.
Yeah.
And your kids may stop at 50. But and he goes, at some point, the whole life will be beautiful. And I kind of love that.
Yeah.
I really did kind of love that.
That's probably a good place to draw this to a close for today. That's a very cool thing to have said. That's awesome. Yeah, that is awesome. Cool. I haven't done that exercise yet, but I have given it some thought. But
I started it. I did not, just the first. Yeah. And it is, to your point, a really interesting exercise to go through.
Yeah. I was pleased that you shared that on the session on the Zoom. There's now a podcast with Joshua, and you asked that question. And I was very interested to hear that the medics said that all of these older people do that, go back to those early years and talk just about that. Yeah.
Crazy. Well, great day, great week, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.